You can't get bigger than Sia as far as a powerhouse voice to come in on talent show night to sing a song. Forget the singing and the performing, which is like what I'm blown away with every time. She was, so excited to do that dressing room scene.
When you get a big celebrity like that, the entire schedule gets built around, like, you shoot them out as fast as possible. It's whatever their schedule is, your schedule backs into that. With Company Retreat, it's like, no, we have a talent show that's going on from 4 to 6 tonight. Like, we need a celebrity that can show up between 4 and 6 because they need to be at the Rock and Grandma talent show. It's not built around Sia's schedule. It's built around the talent show schedule.
Hello and welcome to Obsess the Podcast. I'm Matt Wilstein from The Daily Beast. And today on the show, we are talking to two of the genius minds behind one of my favorite shows on TV right now, Jury Duty presents Company Retreat. Yes, today on the show, I'm talking to the co-showrunner, Lee Eisenberg, who is the Emmy-nominated writer who spent years working on The Office, and director Jake Szymanski, who got his start at Funny or Die and SNL. They both collaborate on this brilliant show, Jury Duty, which is basically a very elaborate prank show where instead of embarrassing someone, it turns them into the hero of their own story. Everyone in the show is a very funny improv actor, except for the central character who is a real person. So last season, it was Ronald Gladden who took part in a fake jury. This season, it's Anthony Norman, who is a temp at a fake company on a fake company retreat. And, hilarity ensues in so many insane ways that I can't even explain to you in this moment. I could not wait to talk to Lee and Jake about how in the world they pulled off this TV miracle again, now that the final 2 episodes are available to stream on Amazon Prime Video. So let's get into it now. Here's my conversation with Lee Eisenberg and Jake Szymanski. Lee Eisenberg and Jake Szymanski, welcome to Obsess the Podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I have so many questions about this new season that you guys put together, as you can imagine, but I do like to start these conversations with a question, which is, what is the first piece of pop culture that you each remember being just really obsessed with as a kid growing up?
Oh, man. I would say for me, I probably saw Stripes probably conservatively 1,200 times. Like I could recite the movie top to tail. And that was kind of like, anything Harold Ramis or Ivan Reitman, between 1982 and 1987 is kind of, that's it. But Stripes for me was kind of, that was the one.
I think I'm trying to think which one was first. It was either He-Man or Spaceballs. It was something, one of those two in that realm.
Those are good too, yeah.
And you really bring a He-Man sensibility to all of your work, Jake.
Yeah. Thank you. I was really more of a Last Tango in Paris child.
So let's talk about this new season. It is Jury Duty presents Company Retreat. So I like that you found a way to get Jury Duty in there, but even though the show has nothing to do with a jury or jury duty anymore. So that was very smart.
It was very important for us to have a catchy name.
Yeah.
That was as tough as pulling the show off again.
Yeah, it was. Figuring out what to call this thing. Well, I will say I was a huge fan of the first season, as so many people were. When I heard you were doing a second season, my first thought was, how on earth is that possible? How are you going to do this again? It felt like everything happened just right in that first season. You got lightning in a bottle. So, that must have been the huge challenge, right? Is how do we do this again? And I think it has to start with finding a subject for the center of the show who is as perfect as Ronald was in that first season. So can you talk about what that process was like doing it again?
It certainly added a layer of complexity to an already very complex job because luckily with season 1, Jury Duty, it ended up that it broke out a little bit and quite a few people saw it. So part of the job beyond not only finding the right type of person, a special person, a decent person, a kind person, a confident person, was also finding someone who had never seen Jury Duty or heard of it or seen clips from it that might make them more suspicious. So that added a layer, certainly.
That seems quite difficult because it's like you would need them to not have seen Jury Duty, but if you asked them about Jury Duty and alerted them to its existence, that would kind of be game over too. So how do you even do that?
I would say, without giving away too many of our secrets, some of the other producers have, worked for Sacha Baron Cohen, for upwards of 2 decades. And so over time, you kind of hone the ways of finding subjects and the questions you ask. You find ways of kind of getting a lot of information without it feeling like, so do you know who Ronald Gladden is? That's not, top of the top question that we're asking. Um, no, but with a show like this, there's such a, you know, there are many reasons why it took 3 years between seasons,
Hmm.
and there's nothing as fun and light as the show can feel, there's really nothing casual about the making of it and the preparation and the anxiety that goes into essentially every moment of it, from the casting to finding locations to finding places to hide, all the cameras that we have, to finding a cast that are incredible but also not quite discovered. Um and Jake and I have been doing this for upwards of 20 years each, and every production, every day there is something. I'm doing a movie right now, and there's a stand-up comic. It's with a stand-up comedian, and it was our first day of shooting, and the wireless mic didn't work. And you're like, of all the things that could not work, like there's not batteries in the microphone. And so, you stop and you're like, hey, can we get some batteries for the microphone? And people, 50 people descend and you fix it. In jury duty, you don't have that luxury because you're pretending to make a documentary with a crew of 8 to 10 people. So the other, 80 people that would be there, that are hidden in all sorts of places, like you don't have the luxury of calling cut ever. And so it's a completely different way of making a show.
Yeah, it's insane. It's funny you mentioned the people who have worked with Sacha Baron Cohen, because I was thinking about how he has said that the reason why he started is sort of had to come up with these new characters with very elaborate, costumes and prosthetics and things, because he was getting recognized. People knew who Borat was at this point. He couldn't just go out in the street and fool everyone. And it does feel similar here, whereas there's just more awareness of the show. And I know you're doing something very different from Sacha Baron Cohen, where he's kind of out to humiliate people, and you're out to create a hero out of the main character of your show, who was, Ronald in the jury duty in the first season. And now we have Anthony, this guy, this temp who comes into a company retreat, and he delivered, I could imagine so much more than you could have wildly hoped. So what was it about him that made you feel like he was right? And then how did he kind of even defy the expectations that you may have had?
I mean, you don't know exactly where you're going to get, from anyone. And there's a job interview that happens, and we try to be as careful and precise and intentional as we can be. And both with Ronald and with Anthony, just at every turn they exceeded our expectations. I mean, they're both they're both incredibly decent, smart, lovely people, and we, as the creative force behind the show, we fell in love with them, and we kind of feel like, well, if we fall in love with them, then hopefully the audience feels the same as we do. And then the other part of it that is really not manufactured, because the kind of the ethos for when we sold jury duty in the first place was, we never want to punch down, and they're never the butt of the joke. And so the way that the cast connected in season one with Ronald and season two with Anthony, that is completely genuine. They are lovely people, and they are the types of people that other people immediately connect with, and that part is real. Those friendships are real. Those relationships are very uh, are genuine. And so I think that that's something that, on top of all the comedy and the set pieces and all the kind of prank elements that that people might expect in a hidden camera show, underneath it all, there's something decent and kind of in a way aspirational. I think that right now the world is a bit of a dumpster fire, and everywhere you turn is are lies and and misinformation and cynicism. And all of a sudden you have something where at the center of it is a hero, and that's something very intentional from the beginning. We called that character the hero. They were never the mark. Like I said, they were never the butt of the joke, and it's about seeing kind of the best of humanity. And I think to have a show that kind of delivers on the comedy in the way that we think the show does, and then kind of have this guy who goes through this hero's journey and saves a company with people that he met, days earlier, I think is very satisfying. And for us, like I said, it's like the creative team behind the show, like that, like maybe more than anything, it's like the end of the season where he finally does it. You're like, oh, like that to me is more satisfying than any laugh.
Yeah, I definitely wanna get to the end of the season again. I wanna get to the end of the season, but I think the other just casting piece I wanna talk about is all of the people surrounding Anthony in the company, because that's also a huge challenge, I think, because you have to get really funny people, really great improvisers. They can't be famous enough that he might recognize them. So you're basically getting people who haven't done too much but are really good. And everyone on the show is fantastic, really funny, very real. Um, it feels like casting a sitcom with all of these different characters. And I know obviously, Lee, you started out on The Office, so that's sort of where that DNA is from. What is that process like of finding the people to populate this office, and how did it compare maybe to your experience, working on scripted shows like The Office?
I mean, it's everything you're saying. I mean, one of the joys of working on The Office was it was all discovery, and so it's discovery for the audience and it's discovery for the writers of the show. And you keep pushing the limits of what you think someone can do, and when you cast the right people, they surprise you every day, and that's exactly what happened here. We take people through auditions. We give people, kind of loose kind of archetypes of characters and tropes, and you're doing mock interviews, and you're putting them in situations, and you're really kind of trying to field test them because, again, this is the only scripted show on TV that there are no cuts. So the actors have a tremendous responsibility, and not to take anything away from Jake, who's an incredible director, like more so than anything else. I mean, we rehearse like crazy, but sometimes the actors are directing themselves because there isn't the opportunity for Jake to step in and say, like, hold on, guys, let's try that one and do it this way. And so there's just an inherent danger to it. So you really are putting so much faith in the performances. And that's why rehearsals are so critical to our process. And we're so careful with the writing. And then it keeps evolving. It's like you kind of have a germ of an idea, you turn it into the script, then you do the rehearsals, you're rewriting, you're rewriting, you're rewriting. And then on the day, you're like, well, fuck, that's not the way we thought it was going to go. Like, how do we get Anthony back to this thing? Or, how is Anthony going to sit at the lunch table? Or like, what if he doesn't sit next to so-and-so? Like, how are we going to arrange it? So, you pull someone out for a talking head and you're like, hey, when you get back in there, can you casually mention to this person in front of Anthony that they should go here? It's like directing by proxy.
I call it like directing by flowchart almost. Where in rehearsal we have the best plan that we want to do, and then we try to figure out the 5 other things that might happen instead, and try to have a plan for it. And then still, you obviously can't predict everything that's going to happen, and we're on the fly. I think I had 4 sets of walkies that were going into 3 different groups of earwigs in people's ear that we can talk to and try to move things around. And ultimately, we have scripted episodes with things that need to happen each episode. And yes, we might start to rearrange or change on the fly, but like we are trying to get through those storylines for every episode. And so it's a lot of rehearsal. It's a lot of A, B, C, D, E, or F, could happen. And then it's based on all that rehearsal and all that planning. When something new happens that you never planned on, you can still usually find a way to get there.
And I think there's a surprise for the audience how much the show is written. Like there's nothing casual about it. I mean, again, there's a tremendous amount of surprise and delight when things don't go exactly the way you plan, or that, an actor kind of improv something that's amazing. But I think about the proposal scene in the pilot, and it's like, oh yeah, that was written 2 years ago. That, like, the whole shape of that, his speech, Kevin's speech to Amy, like, yep, that's all of that was exactly as it was written, and then an actor performed it in the way that they would in the scripted show.
Yeah, so I will say, as someone who watches a lot of comedy, I did, recognize a couple people from things in there. I would say that the riskiest move that you made is bringing in Ian Roberts, who's one of the founders of UCB, to do one of
Yes.
the seminars. Not only because he's probably the most recognizable person on the show, he was on Arrested Development, some other things, um, but he's so funny in his
So
performance that
funny.
it seems like it was difficult for the actors to accept, act like this was a real thing that was happening in front of them. Is that right?
Yeah, and yet he is, because he is one of, he's one of the founders of UCB. He's a huge part of the modern improv movement that, like, so many of these actors came out of. All those things you're saying are correct as far as danger, and yet there is no one who is better at coming in and giving an hour and a half speech that seems 90% based in reality and find a way to turn 10% into insanity in a way that's believable than Ian Roberts. He just was so good at it. I mean, if that tells you anything, look at what's in the show. Look at how funny it is. He spoke for an hour and did it in a way where all those moments that are in the show were believable to Anthony in real life.
But that's just off of what Jake's saying. That's one thing, because people are like, "Is it real?" Like that kind of thing. So much of what we call it the reality bank, and there are so many hours of tedium and boring stuff. Like not every seminar is Lisa Gilroy or Ian Roberts. It's like it is like the most boring corporate speak thing that you're kind of like,
You brought in Eric Swalwell, who
yeah.
who didn't make the
Yeah.
show.
Eric Swalwell did not make the show. That's how deep our bench was. No, but I think you have this thing where if every scene, if every moment of the day was, oh my God, this crazy thing happened, I think at a certain point Anthony would be like, okay, where are the cameras? But if for 6 hours you were just doing the most mundane activities, and then one weird thing happens, and you're like, oh, like, and then you go back and there's four more hours of boredom. Like you don't, that's not the way that you talk about. You know what I mean? Like, so we do so much to kind of build that, like we said, putting money, putting it, things into the reality bank, that you're given the opportunity to let Ian Roberts run wild for 7 minutes of an hour and a half.
And in truth, we took a lot more big swings in season 2 than season 1. Like the reality bank was more important than ever with how much we put in front of Anthony. And really, the writers, along with the producers who are all helping plan this, like they're writing 2 shows. They're writing the show in the episodes that you see on TV, and then you're writing and creating everything else in real time that Anthony is going to live for those weeks that he's with us. And most of that's not in the show. It still all has to be planned.
Hmm. Yeah. One of those really big swings is the celebrity who you bring into this season. You don't have James Marsden, who was a regular celebrity on the first season, which I thought was very smart. But you did find a way to bring in a celebrity guest anyway. I like that it had to be someone, big enough that Anthony probably knew who it was, even though he doesn't know a lot of other pop culture stuff. So that also must have been an interesting thing to figure out.
It is kind of tricky to find the right person. I mean, lucky for us, I mean, you kind of can't get bigger than Sia as far as a powerhouse voice to come in on talent show night to sing a
Yeah.
song.
And a good character.
and a great character. And she was just she was a fan of season 1, and she has a relationship with a couple of the producers as well that go back a few years. And she was just down. She was down to come in and help us, and we're very thankful that she did, and it turned out great. But yeah, like forget the singing and the performing, which is like what I'm blown away with every time. She was, so excited to do that dressing room scene and play with getting out of there on the bus on the show. So we were just very lucky to have her.
Jake and I were talking earlier, and when you get a big celebrity like that, like the entire schedule gets built around, like you shoot them out as fast as possible. It's like, oh, they need to be, whatever their schedule is, your schedule backs into that. And it's like with Company Retreat, it's like, no, we have a talent show that's going on from 4 to 6 tonight. Like we need a celebrity that can show up between 4 and 6 because they need to be at the Rock and Grandma talent show. It's not built around Sia's schedule. It's built around the talent show schedule. And so that is a paradigm shift that I don't think most people are used to. The fictional company's, schedule of events was really chief among them.
Correct.
Lee, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how your experience on The Office did shape, this show, the first season, this season. I was thinking watching the new season about there is a very famous retreat episode, company retreat episode of The Office. I'm not sure if you worked on that.
I did.
But how do you think about like how your experience on that show, informs jury duty?
I mean, The Office, Greg Daniels was my mentor. And the thing about The Office was, as much as possible, it felt small and real and relatable. And that was the kind of the thing that was most exciting to me. And it was all the comedy came from character. And so when we kind of set out to do jury duty, it was the same thing. It's like, how do you take the most mundane thing around, which is jury duty, and enliven it with all the kind of the strange and surprising people that you might meet on a jury, and James Marsden, which was inspired by me seeing Henry Rollins, the singer, at jury duty in downtown LA and reading that Tom Hanks had served on a jury somewhere. So with season 2 is the same thing. It's like the challenge was in season 1, it's you're bringing a bunch of strangers together, and Ronald is one of the strangers. In season 2, the family already exists. So the challenge was these people need to have inside jokes. Someone needs to know who started at the company before them, who got the promotion when. All that stuff needs to be baked into it. And then Anthony is kind of dropped into that world and has to connect enough. And so we really wanted, we gave the actors, we wanted to build the characters out with them. We worked with them very closely on building those dynamics. But at the core of it, we love the size of the company. It felt very much spiritually related to a Dunder Mifflin. We like a company retreat where, obviously, when Trucas comes in, things get a little bit bigger and you get Sia there. But really before that, it's lame. And they're doing trust falls, and they have their, the Doug Cassalon is the big thing, and they have merch and people are excited about the merch. And, it's exciting for people to go to that thing, and, they're taken care of and they're away from their families and all of that stuff that I think so many people and who work in corporate America have been to one of those events. And that was one of the guiding principles of it. And then on top of it, you need something where you're sequestering people, where it's organic to say like, hey guys, we really want to focus here, so we're gonna, everyone's gonna put their phones away. We don't want people online, so that Anthony isn't Googling everyone every moment of the day. And so you build the things that, within the parameters that we have. But more than anything, we really wanted to build a show that had proper jokes, which feels like fewer and fewer shows are doing these days. And so we really, we cast the funniest people we can find. The writing staff is just, a murderer's row. And then at the center of it, we also we really try to have a tremendous amount of heart in it.
It's such an insane and funny show. I mean, and it is laugh out loud funny, in a way, like you say, that not a lot of things are. And yet, when we get to the final episode, I find myself tearing up, as does everyone in the cast, and I think you guys a little bit behind the scenes.
Oh yeah.
So what is that about? Like, how do you thread that needle of making such a funny show that has this emotional wallop at the end when Anthony finds out finally what's been going on, and has to kind of come to terms with that?
I think I mean, at the end of the day, we're really lucky that we're scripting this world, we're scripting these characters, and we are, kind of on purpose, in a way, setting the season arcs and the character arcs with certain almost tropes from movies and shows, because there's almost something more exciting about seeing a real person who's not an actor do the thing that you're used to seeing in a TV show or a movie. And where I think someone like Anthony, in the format of our show, is really able to take it to the next level is he really is sharing a part of himself with us. And even though we always wanted it to be a big scene at the end where he runs into the room and stops the meeting and takes the pen out of Doug's hand, we always wanted that. That was the goal. He did that. And the writer's room could have tried to write the speech that we thought would be best for Anthony to say. But because Anthony's a real person who's lived out and seen these storylines happening around him, he gives a speech that no one could have written for him, because he's really sharing a part of himself.
He's speaking from the heart. Yeah.
He's speaking from the heart, and that's where the heart comes from. And so that to me is really what packs a wallop is you are watching the scripted beats of a show that we were very lucky to pull off with the main character not being an actor. What makes it hit extra hard to me is we've got the right guy at the center of it, our hero, Anthony. And yes, he's opening up his heart to us and sharing himself with us, and that makes it extra special.
And one thing I'll add to that, me and Jake and the other executive producers went away on our own company retreat to break company retreat. So we went up to Ojai and spent several days with a whiteboard and saying like, okay, this could be episode 1, and where do we want things to lead? And that was probably a year and a half or 2 years before we actually shot it. And during that 3-day retreat, we came up with this idea that Anthony's going to run down a hill and stop Doug from from signing this big deal with a private equity company that had not yet been named. And you write these things and you have no idea how it's going to play out. And we thought, okay, well, this feels like a satisfying thing. The temp is going to stop the CEO of a company from signing a thing. He's going to save the company. And then you see it in practice. And again, so much of this is a testament to our casting directors and the people who cast Anthony. What he did, I mean, when he said father to father, the first time he said it, it took my breath away. And I didn't write it, and I had nothing to do with it. I hoped that he would run down the hill and do this thing, and everything he did in that moment was like it's you're scared because you're like, oh my god, at some point is the illusion of the facade going to break, and are we gonna we're so close to the end. And then the emotionality of that moment, as you're saying that, that to me is like what's the special sauce of the show. And again, like we can't control those moments from a Ronald or an Anthony. Like, you don't know what the hero is going to do, and if you cast it right, they're gonna do something incredible every time.
Well, I love the show, and I thank you guys for being here and for making it. I do like to end these conversations by asking my guests, what's something in pop culture, a show, a movie, something that you're just really obsessed with, loving right now, that you would, shout out or recommend, something that you're enjoying.
I don't have a great answer for you, Matt, but I will give you an answer, but I have to caveat it. I have 3 children under 10 years old. And so a lot of my viewing habits revolve around them and what we can watch together. And the other day, I caught them watching some generic sitcom like made in the early 2020s on a streamer which shall not be named, but kind of like peak TV. They were just making sitcoms to get up there. And I was watching it going like, if you guys are going to watch a sitcom, like, let's at least watch a good one, a better one. But I wanted to find one that was kid appropriate. And we started rewatching the original Full House from back in the day. And my kids are obsessed with it. And it's been a fun time travel machine. Yeah, I was shocked how locked in they were to it. And so right now, my house is very much on the original TGI Friday Full House.
That was big for me growing up. Yeah. Well, I have 2 kids under 5, so we're not at Full House yet, but maybe we'll get there.
In it, man.
Well, yeah, thank you guys so much for doing this. Jury Duty Presents Company Retreat is streaming now on Prime Video. Everyone, please go check it out. Lee Eisenberg and Jake Szymanski, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Matt.
I want to thank Lee Eisenberg and Jake Szymanski so much for that incredible conversation. I love hearing about how everything on Jury Duty works behind the scenes, and I hope you do too. If you're enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Obsessed channel. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think of this episode, of all of our episodes, and who you want to hear next on the show. Leave us a rating and review on Apple and Spotify as well. Subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you to our producers, Rachel Passer and Devin Rogerino, and we'll be back with an all-new episode of Obsessed the Podcast very soon.